Super fun to look back in this era and all the fun silliness you got to do. It's even written in the torch that your impersonation on Nitro was a big hit with the locker room, and
Oh,
and they said that Dustin was cool with you impersonating his dad.
oh,
Was that discussed at all? I mean, he knows it's
yeah,
business.
I don't. Yeah, but me and again, when with Dustin and AEW, I've actually had. Yeah, I mean, just people don't realize how far back me and Dustin go. 88. The other day, I was ribbing him about, yeah, your car's out back, Dustin. It's a little red Dodge pickup truck. It's the first car he had when I met him. So, anyhow, no, it was all good. A lot of fun, actually. A lot of fun.
As we fast forward to Greenville, South Carolina on March 6th, I mean, we're less than 3 weeks away from WWE buying
It's
WCW and that
unbelievable.
being it. We see Ric Flair come out here. Now he's got the fat suit on, and Dusty Rhodes is going to cut a promo on Rick and call him Fat Boy. And it does the best rating of the entire Nitro is actually Dusty and Dustin teaming up to take on Road Warrior Animal and Ric Flair. Of course, we know where we're getting. We're going to be working with you guys on the big pay per view, the last one. It is kind of crazy to think that
Yes, I know where you're
you know
going.
in the dying days of WCW, in the ashes of, I mean, by this point, your dad's promotion, he's out of the wrestling business, he's done, and now it feels like the end of Jim Crockett Promotions. I know that WCW became a thing when Crockett got bought out back in '88, but when WCW sells to Vince, that's really sort of the end
Oh,
of
it is.
territory wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions, all that jazz. And Dusty finds himself with one last opportunity on big time television like that. And this is interesting for Dusty because he had been fired the year prior as a part of a downsizing payroll cut. He did get a big severance check, but still being shown the door on something that you helped build, and now on its last legs, he's got one last opportunity, and it winds up being there with you. I really do think on some level, dude, you're like the freaking Forrest Gump of wrestling. Here you are again in this special moment.
Connie, and doing the podcast is when I don't want. Yeah, the historical perspective. There are no such thing or coincidences. It's a convergence. The Grand Weaver. There is no doubt in my mind, from the Jim Crockett days to the WCW's final nail in the coffin. And you could maybe argue Stinger, but Sting's um, I just don't think he's got enough in the Jim Crockett days. So the two guys with, I think, in a lot of ways, by far the most historical importance in Jim Crockett Promotions, from the territory to going national and the run all the way up. And Flair went to WWF and came back. Dusty got let go, and from Booker to announcer and all the history. They had never ever wrestled against each other on pay-per-view. And it takes the last event and me and Rick's relationship, Dusty with his son, and we're on the last pay-per-view. Connie, it's really, to me, a fascinating kind of footnote to WCW, but a just, I don't even want to call it an Easter egg, but it really is a unique highlight, if you will, in my career.
It's fun too to give perspective. This is going to be his last match in WCW, what's left of Jim Crockett Promotions. He's not going to wrestle again for WWE on their national television until 2006. He'll have a couple of matches there, and then one in '07. It's really interesting to think, that this is, of all the opponents, it's you. I mean, Dave Silva, our producer, he's even private messaging us now saying Jeff's really the last match outlaw because you were there for Flair's. And I know this isn't exactly Dusty's last match, but Dusty's last match in WCW and JCP. Super cool. But I do want to ask you, because the WCW website in this era even promoted, hey, Dusty versus Jarrett. And then they come out and say, well, no, that was a mistake. And in reality, there's reports that behind the scenes, Dusty couldn't agree on money with WCW. Maybe he still had some hurt feelings about being let go the year before. Do you remember hearing that they were working towards a singles match with you and Dusty, not a tag match, and then it fell apart for money?
I mean, yes, I heard. Look, you heard so many things, but I do truly believe that the four of us were enjoying it and knew there was some legs on it. But when I did the impersonation, it really lasered in. And look, it's almost ridiculous for me to say that, Dusty Flair. But at this point, Rick was wrestling in slacks and Hawaiian shirts, and it just kind of was what it was. And he was a little bit disenfranchised for all the obvious and right reasons. But when I did the impersonation, it's like we shot the angle between me and Dusty in a lot of ways. And so, yes, they were headed that way. But I didn't hear all the money talk and, right hand talking to the left hand, or not talking to the left hand was no surprise during this era. That the live event promoter was always wanting, hey man, we need something to push tickets. We need something to hear this and that. It was obviously a cluster in a lot of ways, but yeah, what a little fun era of my career.
Let's talk a little bit about creative. There's reports in both the Observer and the Torch that you and Rick were not necessarily happy with how the creative was being done with the fake Dusty angle. And there's even another report that Flair was told by WCW management to tone down his character, be more calm and deliberate, not the ranting and raving lunatic. Wade would even say, neither Dusty nor Rick have been especially happy with their segments together, in part because of the handcuffs placed on them. The idea being they wanted to go be perhaps Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes from JCP from 10 or 15 years prior. And I guess management will say, no, you can't do it that way. Do you remember there being back and forth about what you could or couldn't do in these segments?
So obviously I wasn't privy to any of this, but when I read the research and Meltzer or Keller or both phrased it as WCW management, I thought to myself, as Connie would say, okay, WCW manager. They're not really saying Kevin Sullivan or Eric Bischoff or Vince Russo or any of the names. I took that as, wait a minute, is practice and standards and practices weighing in, and they've got an issue, and maybe Rick had said a few things, or they were in fear of that, or were they more worried that Dusty and because man, when you go back during this time frame, and Eric or Russo are much more qualified because of kind of their positions, but I know that standards and practices, they really wanted formats and they wanted to see what everything was going to be said. They were trying to do their job, but also that's a network, not completely understanding the business they're in, that the best stuff is not scripted by far. But I read that as WCW management's wanting them to tone it down. I think it's probably a better phrase. Maybe standards and practices wanted more control. And those two guys had no problem at all telling Eric or Vince or Ed Ferrar or any of them, don't give me no freaking script. Tell me where you want to go, and that's what I'm doing. That's exactly how they were born and raised and made their money at.